1. Garrett Bardsley. On Friday, August 20th, 2004, while on a Boy Scouts camping trip, Garrett Bardsley, age 12, and his father, Kevin, were camping in the Utah woods on Uinta Mountains. The pair were fishing on the lake, 140 meters from the troop's campsite. Garrett got a little too close to the water while fishing, completely soaking his shoes and socks. He decided to walk back to his campsite to change. The Scouts' troops' tents were a mere 140 meters, or 450 feet away, so Garrett's father allowed his 12-year-old son to go back to his tent alone. For comparison's purposes, the distance between the lake and the campsite was only that of the length of 1.5 football fields. There was no need to worry because they had walked that trail several times, and Garrett had also completed the Boy Scouts wilderness survival training. Kevin kept his eyes on Garrett as he walked around the lake, and even shouted directions, reminding Garrett which path would lead him straight back to the camp. But after 20 minutes, Kevin wondered what was taking his son so long to return to him. The now concerned father returned to the camp, but Garrett was nowhere to be seen. Trip coordinators say they had picked the spot because it was sheltered, had easily identifiable natural landmarks, and was seemingly difficult to get lost in. Although an official search began less than 40 minutes after Garrett was last seen, the boy was nowhere to be found. After about 5 days, the search was no longer slated to be for that of a missing person. Instead, it became a recovery mission. Family members, neighbors, friends, and churchgoers aided officials in the search for the missing Garrett Bardsley, but he was never found. Garrett was last seen wearing a t-shirt, black hooded sweatshirt, red sweatpants, and Converse tennis shoes. The only evidence that searchers found was the boy's Nike sock, 0.8 kilometers, or 5.5 miles, away from the spot where he disappeared. The local police decided that there was not enough evidence to point to a kidnapping. Officials believe the boy got lost and died of exposure. However, Kevin Bardsley says that he will never give up hope of finding his son. 2. Patty Krieger. Patty had been hiking with her boyfriend, Larry Presley, her Rottweiler, Bear, James Presley, Nicole Gardner, Troy Robinson, Chrissy Jones Bumgardner, and Matt Robinson. According to those Patty was with, they had been on the mountain that day to spread the ashes of Larry's deceased parents, who had passed away several months earlier. The group Patty was hiking with says that Patty became emotional after the ceremony, and that she headed down a different trail than the rest of the hikers. They say she figured the trails would reconnect, and that they would meet Patty and her dog Bear back at the trailhead. Patty and Bear never showed up. Patty's car keys and driver's license were found to be in possession of the individuals that she was hiking with. Patty's cell phone was in the possession of one of Larry Presley's friends back at Patty's house. It is unclear if there were any other personal items in Patty's possession at the time of her disappearance. It should be noted that Patty used hearing aids. After learning that their 65-year-old friend, Patty Krieger, had not made it back to the trailhead, the hikers Patty was with decided not to wait around for her, and instead left the mountain. Larry Presley, Patty's boyfriend, went with some of the other hikers to a local gas station and bought burritos and beer. Some of the other hikers went to a local supermarket and went grocery shopping. 4 hours later, Larry and some of his friends went back to Sauk Mountain at that time and reported Patty missing. When Larry Presley and his family and friends reported Patty missing, they claimed to be Patty's family, and her actual family was not notified of her disappearance. According to her son, he was not alerted to her missing status until the next day, a Sunday, when she didn't show up for her job. Patty had worked for Fred Meyers for 30 years, and when she was absent, her boss immediately called her and then called her emergency contact, her son. Her son, after not being able to contact his mother, went to file a police report and found that one had already been opened the day before. Patty Krieger and Bear were officially missing. Within 48 hours, search teams for 4 counties arrived and by foot searched the mountain and the trails with no results. The day after, a helicopter search was started using forward-looking infrared technology with no results. Search and rescue dogs were used at some point within the first 48 hours. They hit on the parking lot and on the main trail, which led police to believe she had in fact gotten off the mountain, perhaps after her group had left. By the 10th of April, police had officially stated they did not believe she was still on the mountain. 26 days after she disappears, her dog Bear is found in poor condition, malnourished and emaciated in the area of Sauk Mountain. After her dog was found, police changed their theory, believing that she may not have left the mountain after all. There are several theories on Patty's disappearance. There's a possibility that she could have easily fallen and injured herself, eventually succumbing to the elements. And then there is one theory which suggests that Larry, Patty's boyfriend, killed her and disposed of her body. It is mentioned several times in various news articles that her boyfriend Presley was a felon, and one source, K5 News, states that he had been sentenced previously for child rape, drive-by shooting, and assault on police officers. According to the Concrete Herald, Krieger's son, Alan Patterson, stated that 2 days after Krieger had gone missing, he was aiding the search when, along the Sauk Mountain Road, not along the trail, he encountered Presley, who thus far had not aided in the search of Krieger. He claimed Presley was acting suspiciously. While family and friends of Patty claim that Larry Presley has been very non-cooperative with the family, he was upset when they started a Facebook page after her disappearance and confronted the family about it. When he found out that a longtime friend and co-worker of Krieger was running the Facebook page, he confronted him as well. He was also seen many times driving Krieger's luxury vehicles around town, as opposed to his own vehicle. The family was having a court dispute over their rights to Krieger's house and belongings. Rather than cooperate, Presley decided to vacate the home. When the family finally gained entrance, Krieger's house and belongings were described as being trashed. Titles to her cars were left out on the kitchen counters. Her safe and safety deposit box had been opened and rifled through, with items missing. The family moved Krieger's vehicles to another location, where they were involved in a drive-by shooting. They believe Presley is behind this as retaliation. It is also worth noting that less than a year after Krieger's disappearance, Presley was married to another woman. He is currently serving 10 years in prison for charges unrelated to Krieger's disappearance. Her son, friends, and family of Krieger believe that she is deceased and still regularly search the mountain for her remains. 3. Diana Robertson. On December 12, 1985, 36-year-old Mike Reamer, his 21-year-old girlfriend Diana Robertson, and their 2-year-old daughter Crystal left their home in Puyallup, Washington, for a trip into the woods to find a Christmas tree. Mike worked as a trapper during the winter months and was also planning to use this opportunity to check his hunting traps. Later that afternoon, Crystal would be found wandering alone outside a Kmart in the town of Spanaway. Since her parents could not be located, Crystal was placed in temporary foster care and was not identified until her photo was placed in the newspaper and her maternal grandmother recognized her. Mike and Diana had vanished without a trace. All Crystal could tell police was that Mommy is in the trees. 2 months later, Mike Reamer's pickup truck was discovered on a remote logging road in the woods, 30 miles from the Kmart where Crystal was found. Diana Roberts' body was lying on the ground. She had been stabbed 17 times, and a tube sock was wrapped around her neck. There were bloodstains inside the truck, but since 2 months of winter weather had caused the evidence to degrade, forensic tests could not match the blood to a specific person. An envelope was found under the windshield with the words, "I love you, Diana," written on it. Although her mother believed it was Mike's handwriting, it could not be confirmed. A search of the surrounding woods turned up no trace of Mike. Police explored the possibility that Mike could have killed Diana before dropping Crystal off at the Kmart. He had a history of domestic violence, and Diana had filed a restraining order against him 2 months prior to her death, though the couple eventually reconciled. Another complication was that 4 months earlier, the forest area where Crystal's parents disappeared had been the scene of 2 brutal murders. 27-year-old Stephen Harkins and his 42-year-old girlfriend Ruth Cooper were murdered while camping near a lake 15 miles away from the logging road. Stephen was shot to death inside his sleeping bag while Ruth's remains were found a mile and a half away months later. Like Diana Robertson, Ruth had a tube sock tied around her neck with the same type of knot, suggesting that they were both killed by the same person. Since Mike Reamer was known to check his animal traps in the same area where the couple was found, police wondered if he might have been a serial killer who was responsible for both murders. Police had not been able to determine if he was alive or dead, or if he was the killer or a victim. Mike's whereabouts remained unknown until March 2011, when a hiker discovered a skull fragment in a wooded area located a mile from where Diana was found. When police searched the area, they found a human mandible, and dental records confirmed that it belonged to Mike. The rest of Mike's remains were never found, and his exact cause of death could not be determined, but the condition of the skull fragment seems to indicate that he was not killed by a gunshot to the head. While it's possible Mike could have murdered Diana, driven Crystal to the Kmart, returned to the murder scene, and gone into the woods to commit suicide, the most likely theory seems to be that an unknown killer murdered both couples and dropped Crystal off. Police have since ruled out Mike as a suspect in the double murder. 4. Jared Adedero. In October of 1999, Jared Adedero, 3, went on a hike up the Big South Trail in Poudre Canyon, Colorado, with a group of adults and his 6-year-old sister. His father, Alan Adedero, stayed back at the lodge that he owned and operated. Alan knew the adults that were taking his children on a hike from a Christian group that had stayed at his lodge, the Poudre River Resorts, and trusted the 10 adults. The group chose to hike the Comanche Peak on a trail that goes deep into the heart of the massive 260 square kilometer wildlife reserve. While on the trail, the 10 adults were split between 2 groups, and the kids were running between the groups. Jared most likely ran ahead to catch up to the lead group, and then ran past them to surprise them on the trail. This was the last time he was spotted by his group. Each member of the group gave the New York Times drastically different estimates as to how long they were hiking before anyone noticed that the toddler was gone, ranging from 20 minutes to an hour and a half. A search party with over 50 people brought dogs to look for Jared for several days, but was thwarted by an SAR helicopter crash on October 5th and snow that rolled into the Rocky Mountains. Jared was believed to be spotted by 2 fishermen on the trail, who he approached and asked them if there were bears nearby. The fishermen confirmed that they were in Bexar County, and then Jared left. Searchers found a set of prints that were initially thought to be Jared's, but were later identified by wildlife experts as bear tracks that were interwoven as the bear went up and down the trail. During the search, a park ranger at Mesa Verde National Park filed a sighting report at Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado, a 9-hour drive from Poudre Canyon, after seeing Jared's photo on the news while eating dinner. He was certain he had seen the boy that day and stated that the boy kept trying to hold his hand. A man who he had said walking with the boy kept calling him something like Gerald, but thought nothing of it at the time. His statement fell on deaf ears. A friend of Alan's, named Cindy, investigated the area where Jared had gone missing. She happened to come across a family staying at a cabin way back in the sticks, who she said was acting suspiciously. They were painting their VW van a different color when they noticed her watching. One of them jumped into a truck and sped over to her, screaming at her to leave. She told a friend, who reported it to the sheriff, but it was ignored. Despite the extensive search, none of Jared's remains were found until 2003, a staggering 170 meters, 550 feet, above the trail in a location that is difficult even for adults to climb. They found Jared's sneakers. They appeared to be brand new, although he had been missing for years. They also found his sweatshirt, which was fully intact, and his pants, which were inside out as if they were pulled off of him. Around 45 meters, 150 feet, away from his clothing, they found one tooth and a piece of his skull. Some people have theorized that a mountain lion carried his body up the steep trail, but many others believe that he was murdered. If he had been attacked by a mountain lion or by a bear, his clothing would have been torn to shreds. To this day, Jared's case remains unsolved. 5. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park disappearances. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park borders Tennessee and North Carolina and is the most visited national park in the U.S. Therefore, it's probably inevitable that the park has had its fair share of unsolved disappearances. On June 14, 1969, Dennis Martin was a 7-year-old boy on a camping trip with his family. He was developmentally disabled, so his mental age was behind the other children of his chronological age. His older brother, Douglas, and 2 other boys were playing together in an open field that was surrounded by a forest. The adults were sitting several yards away from the kids, but the adults did not let the children out of their sight. 9-year-old Douglas told Dennis and their friends that it would be funny to prank the adults by going into the woods and sneaking up behind their parents. So the children split up. 3 of the boys went in one direction, but Dennis ran off on his own in the opposite direction. Dennis's father, William, could see everything from where he sat. After the 3 other boys pranked their parents, Dennis did not reemerge from the woods with them. Only 5 minutes had passed, but William got up and began running to the spot where he had last seen Dennis. He screamed his son's name and ran into the woods for 3 kilometers, 2 miles, without seeing any trace of the boy. A massive search was organized, which turned up nothing. A nearby witness recalled hearing a frightening scream sometime that afternoon before he saw a rough-looking man running through the woods. Years later, a man found what appeared to be the skeletal remains of a child in the park, but did not inform the authorities because he was hunting illegally at the time. When he finally reported it during the 1980s, the remains could no longer be found. No one knows if either of these events had any connection to the Dennis Martin disappearance. In the end, Dennis Martin was never found, and absolutely no trace of him has ever turned up. His odd case remains open to this day. Dennis Martin is joined by a long list of people who have vanished without a trace under mysterious circumstances in the Great Smoky Mountains. Another unsolved Smoky Mountains disappearance involved 16-year-old Trenny Gibson, who vanished during a school trip to the park on October 18, 1976. While the students were hiking, Trenny somehow became separated from them and disappeared, never to be seen again. Another strange disappearance occurred on September 25, 1981, when 50-year-old Thelma Pauline Melton was hiking through the park on Deep Creek Trail with 2 friends when she got far ahead of them and disappeared after walking over a hill. Her friends searched the area where Melton had been just moments before, but could find no sign of where she had gone. Making the whole scene even more bizarre was that Melton was overweight and suffered from high blood pressure and nausea, for which she took medication, making it bizarre that she could have gotten away so far from her friends so fast. In fact, Melton's friends had been playfully teasing her about her slow pace not long before she vanished. In 2008, 51-year-old Michael Heron waved goodbye to his family and went out in his four-wheel drive truck to some forest land near their home in Blount County, Tennessee, which lies within the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. When the man did not return home as scheduled, a search was conducted, and Heron's truck was found in a clearing, with the ignition oddly still turned to the on position. But the mystery would only deepen from there. In the vicinity of the truck, there could be found no trace of where Heron could have gone, or what had become of him. No footprints could be found, nor any trail through the dense underbrush that he could have used to go off on his own. Additionally, dogs could not pick up a scent, and authorities could find no torn bits of clothing, no blood or tissue, no bones, no sign of a struggle, and indeed no sign that Heron had ever been there at all. It was as if he had just spontaneously ceased to exist. More recently, 24-year-old Derek Joseph Luking went missing on March 17, 2012. His vehicle was found in the Newfound Gap parking lot. All of his gear had been left behind, but there was a note on the windshield which read, "Don't try to follow me." No trace of Luking could be found anywhere in the park, adding his name to a list of people who have mysteriously disappeared into the Great Smoky Mountains.